It happened just before midnight Eastern Time. At Launch Complex 36 in Florida, Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket, the heavy-lift vehicle that Jeff Bezos has staked years of work and billions of dollars on, exploded in a massive fireball during a static fire test. According to the Associated Press, the explosion shook nearby homes and briefly painted the sky orange. Bloomberg Business confirmed the rocket had exploded while undergoing a test ahead of its NG-4 mission. Cointelegraph captured video of the event. And while New Glenn sits in ruins on the Launchpad, 1,200 miles away in California, SpaceX launched 24 more Starlink satellites this week and successfully tested Starship's 12th flight. Tonight, we put the explosion in context and ask whether Blue Origin can survive the gap it has just opened with its only credible competitor. We are going to cover this story completely: what exactly happened to New Glenn during the static fire test, what the NG-4 mission was supposed to do, what this means for Blue Origin's commercial launch business and its contracts, how SpaceX is responding and where the space race stands right now, what the regional impact is for Florida's Space Coast economy, and whether this is a setback Blue Origin can recover from or a turning point in the commercial space industry. The confirmed timeline of the New Glenn explosion begins in the early hours of May 29. At 1:18 a.m. Eastern, Cointelegraph posted breaking news with video, stating that Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket exploded at LC-36 during a static fire test ahead of its NG-4 mission. At 1:23 a.m., TechCrunch confirmed Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket exploded during testing in Florida. At 2:06 a.m., Business reported the rocket had exploded in a massive fireball while undergoing a test on a Florida launch pad, according to video footage taken of the event. At 2:23 a.m., Ars Technica confirmed the explosion during a static fire test. The Associated Press, filing it SpaceX's Falcon 9 in the commercial launch market. The NG-4 mission it was preparing for represents Blue Origin's ongoing effort to build a credible launch manifest with paying customers. Meanwhile, according to posts from SpaceX, the company successfully launched 24 Starlink satellites from California earlier this week and captured Starlink-equipped buoy video from the Indian Ocean during Starship's 12th flight test, a stark contrast in operational momentum. The first question many viewers are asking is how serious this setback actually is for Blue Origin. The short answer is, very. A static fire test explosion is not a minor anomaly. It destroys the vehicle, damages the launch infrastructure, and typically triggers a stand-down of 6 months to a year or more while investigators determine the root cause, verify fixes, and rebuild the pad. For Blue Origin, which has been struggling to build launch cadence against SpaceX for years, this represents a potentially catastrophic interruption to its momentum. The timing could not be worse. This week, SpaceX was simultaneously announcing that Starlink will provide in-flight Wi-Fi across 880 United Airlines planes by year-end, demonstrating commercial-scale operational deployment. According to posts from Elon Musk, Starlink powers the world's biggest satellite constellation in low Earth orbit. And Starship's 12th flight test conducted this week continues SpaceX's march toward the super heavy lift capability that will eventually make New Glenn look modest by comparison. A second pressing question is what happens to Blue Origin's commercial customers. On that front, the NG-4 mission had a manifest that now cannot fly on the originally scheduled date. Customers who have contracted with Blue Origin for launch services face uncertainty about timelines, and in the competitive launch market, reliability is the primary currency. TechCrunch's simultaneous report that Waymo dominates Texas autonomous vehicle registrations while Tesla trails behind is a useful contextual reminder that in technology races, early operational momentum tends to compound, a lesson that may be the most important one for Blue Origin to absorb right now. How long will it take Blue Origin to recover from a static fire test explosion, and can the company survive the competitive gap? A static fire explosion typically triggers a stand-down of 6 months to over a year for root cause investigation, pad reconstruction and vehicle rebuild. For Blue Origin, which was already significantly behind SpaceX in launch cadence, this setback may extend that gap substantially, particularly as SpaceX continues to fly Starship and scale Starlink deployments during the investigation period. What happens to the customers who had payloads booked on the NG-4 mission? Commercial launch customers facing an indefinite delay on NG-4 will need to seek alternative launch providers, most likely SpaceX or international providers, to meet their deployment schedules. In the competitive launch market, this kind of disruption may cause some customers to shift future business to more operationally reliable providers, compounding Blue Origin's commercial challenge beyond this single incident. In Florida, the explosion's immediate impact is felt on the Space Coast, the stretch of Brevard County that includes Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center. The Space Coast's economy is directly tied to launch frequency and launch infrastructure investment. A Blue Origin Launchpad fire means workers, contractors, and local businesses tied to New Glenn operations face an uncertain timeline. The nearby homes that were reportedly shaken by the blast underscore that this is not just an industry story, it is a local community event. Moving north to the broader American aerospace industry, the story lands as both a warning and a vindication. The Apollo era lesson that spaceflight is hard and unforgiving still applies in 2026, and the contrast between Blue Origin's setback and SpaceX's operational cadence this week illustrates that advantage compounds rapidly in an industry where every successful mission builds the credibility and the engineering knowledge base needed for the next one. In the global space industry, the explosion arrives as other nations are rapidly advancing their own launch programs. China's Long March series has been flying at high cadence. India's ISRO is building momentum. Europe is working to restore Ariane 6's reliability. A Blue Origin setback marginally reduces the diversity of Western heavy lift options, a consideration that has quiet national security implications given how launch capacity interacts with satellite deployment, intelligence assets, and commercial communications infrastructure. And in the context of Elon Musk's broader vision articulated this week in a post from Elon Musk about making the Moon and Mars self-growing civilizations, the New Glenn explosion serves as a reminder of how much harder the road to multi-planetary civilization is than the most ambitious visions suggest. The case for Blue Origin surviving and ultimately succeeding is not without merit. Rocket development has always been dangerous, iterative, and expensive, and the companies that ultimately prevailed in the space industry are not the ones that never failed, but the ones that learned fastest from failure. SpaceX itself destroyed multiple vehicles in early Falcon 9 development and lost the Amos 6 satellite in a 2016 Launchpad explosion that temporarily grounded the entire Falcon 9 fleet. The company recovered, flew again within months, and went on to achieve the launch cadence it has today. Elon Musk's own post this week reflecting on the prime directive of SpaceX being to make self-growing civilizations on the Moon and Mars is a useful reminder that even the most successful space company frames its work in terms of civilizational risk and long-time horizons, not quarterly results. Blue Origin has deep financial backing from one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. And NASA's ongoing investment in Artemis and lunar surface programs, including the Lunar Terrain Vehicle Award issued to Astrolab this week, creates a growing market for heavy-lift launch capability that Blue Origin is explicitly built to serve. The strongest opposing argument is simply that setbacks are part of spaceflight, and the companies that iterate fastest through them write the history. Here is the question that will define the next 2 years in commercial space: Jeff Bezos has the money to rebuild. He has done it before. But at what point does a pattern of setbacks while your competitor achieves milestone after milestone stop being a story about resilience and start being a story about insurmountable structural advantage? Tell us in the comments, do you think Blue Origin can come back from this and compete with SpaceX, or is the gap now too wide to close? Drop your take below.